The Pacific Grand Hotel, downtown Los Angeles. November 1989. A martial arts exhibition and charity gala that would become the most controversial moment in American fighting sports history. The event was supposed to showcase the new generation. Instead, it exposed the difference between performance and mastery, and it taught a 35-year-old man a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. But the story does not begin in that ballroom. It begins earlier. Steven Seagal was 37 years old in November 1989. Aikido black belt, 6'4", 220 pounds, born in Michigan, trained in Japan under masters with names people in the American martial arts community had not heard of, but immediately respected. He had spent the last 3 years building a film career from nothing. First Blood Part 2 was forgotten, but Lethal Weapon, Above the Law, Hard to Kill, these were working. These were legitimate action films, and Steven Seagal was the star. He had become famous fast. Too fast, perhaps, the kind of famous that comes without the years of humbling that usually prepare a martial artist for recognition. He had not spent decades teaching small classes to dedicated students. He had not built his reputation slowly through tournaments, through challenges accepted and answered, through the patient accumulation of respect earned through combat. He had earned it through film, through movie magic, through cameras and stunt coordinators and editors. And it was that contradiction, the distance between what he could do on film and what he could do in reality, that was eating at him. He knew the martial arts community talked about him. He knew they questioned whether his Aikido was real or choreographed. He knew that every time he threw a man 15 feet across a room in slow motion, there were traditional martial artists in theaters thinking, "That's movie magic." And he knew there was one name they invoked when they doubted him. One man they held up as the standard of authentic martial arts mastery. One man who had done it all in reality, not on film. Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris was 49 years old in November 1989. He had won professional karate championships before Seagal was old enough to compete. He had fought George Wallace, Joe Louis, Bruce Lee's students, real fighters in real tournaments with scorecards and rules. He had written books on martial arts philosophy. He had trained celebrities and military personnel. He had spent 4 decades building the kind of reputation that could not be faked. And by 1989, he was also an action film star. Missing in action. Walker, Texas Ranger. Chuck had made the transition from martial artist to actor. Successfully, seamlessly, but unlike Seagal, who had come to fame through film, Chuck had come to film through martial arts. The order mattered. It meant something. Seagal felt the difference. Everyone felt the difference. The Pacific Grand Hotel, November 15, 1989, a gala benefiting a youth martial arts foundation. 200 people in black tie and expensive dresses. Donors, celebrities, martial arts masters, film producers, journalists, photographers. The evening was structured to honor martial arts traditions while celebrating the new generation of action film stars. Seagal was invited to perform a demonstration, 20 minutes of Aikido, throwing volunteers, showing off the martial art that Hollywood had suddenly decided was fascinating. He performed for exactly 20 minutes. Every throw was telegraphed perfectly for the camera angles he intuited were there. They were not. This was live performance, not film. Every movement was larger than it needed to be. Every demonstration was designed to look powerful rather than to be powerful. The audience applauded. It was impressive to watch if you did not understand Aikido. If you did understand it, it looked like choreography. Chuck Norris watched from a table in the back. He was not performing. He was simply attending, drinking water, talking to old friends, present but not dominant. The way he had learned to be over decades. Seagal did not notice Chuck until after the demonstration, when the MC invited Seagal and Chuck to say a few words from the main stage. They stood together for a moment. The height difference was visible. Seagal at 6'4", blonde, striking, with the specific physicality that comes from knowing you have been photographed professionally. Chuck at 6'2", lean, weathered, with the specific physicality that comes from 40 years of actual martial arts training. The MC asked them to share a thought about martial arts and the next generation. Chuck deferred to Seagal. "You're the future." "Please," Seagal took the microphone. His voice carried the confidence of someone who has spent 3 years hearing applause. He spoke about Aikido's philosophy. about the importance of traditional training, about how real martial arts could not be found in movies, only in rigorous discipline and authentic tradition. It was a good speech. It would have been better if it were true. When he finished, he looked directly at Chuck. Not aggressively, just assessed him. Then he said something that would be repeated in martial arts circles for decades. The difference between real martial artists and actors is simple. Real martial artists train for combat. Actors train for camera. No matter how good Chuck was 30 years ago, he's a movie star now. That's what he's chosen to be. I respect that. But let's not confuse action film performance with actual martial skill. The ballroom went quiet. It was not said unkindly, it was said with the specific tone of someone explaining something obvious to someone they suspect might not understand it. The tone of someone young enough to believe he had figured something out that everyone else had missed. Chuck Norris looked at Seagal for a long moment. His face did not change, then he took the microphone from the MC's hand. "Thank you for that perspective," Chuck said. His voice was calm even, the voice of someone who has responded to challenges for 40 years and has learned that tone matters more than volume. "I understand why you might think that. I did walk away from full contact competition in 1974. That's 15 years now that I've been primarily teaching and acting. But I want to address something you said. You're right that I'm an actor now, but I want to clarify I did not become an actor instead of a martial artist. I became an actor because I already was a martial artist. The order matters." He paused. The room was completely silent. "You said real martial artists train for combat and actors train for camera. But there's a third category you missed. Real martial artists who also understand film don't have to choose. And neither do the people watching. Because what you're assuming is that competition karate and aikido demonstration have produced different levels of skill. But I don't think that's what's actually happening here." He set down the microphone. He looked at Seagal with complete, unhurried attention. "I think what's happening is you've trained in a beautiful art against cooperative partners in a controlled environment, and you've made some very effective films. Both of those things are true, and they're both impressive. But you've never had to test yourself against resistance that didn't want to cooperate. And you're assuming that means I haven't either. But that's not what I'm assuming. I'm wondering." The room was suspended in the specific silence of people who understand that something significant is happening. "So here's what I'll do," Chuck said. "If you want to know the difference between demonstration aikido and actual martial skill, I'll show you. Not tomorrow. Not with training. Right now. In front of everyone here. 1 minute. One real test. No choreography, no camera angles, no safety concerns beyond what's reasonable, just honesty." The MC looked panicked. The hotel security looked confused. The audience held its breath. Seagal's face had not changed, but something had shifted behind his eyes. The specific shift that happens when someone realizes they have said something they cannot walk back and is about to find out what walking it back would cost them. He could decline. He could say it was inappropriate for a charity event, that he had nothing to prove, that he respected Chuck's legacy. He could leave the stage with his dignity intact. Or he could say yes. "All right," Seagal said. The words came out before he made a conscious decision to say them, which is how people commit to things they might regret. But not here. This is a ballroom, not a training facility. Chuck nodded. He looked at the MC. "Is there somewhere else in the hotel? A gym, a back room, anywhere with enough space?" "The spa has a training room," the MC said. Still confused but responding to the specific authority that comes from someone who knows exactly what they are about to do. "Downstairs, 2,000 square feet. Empty tonight." "Perfect," Chuck said. He turned to Seagal. "Shall we?" The descent 200 people followed them. Down the stairs, through the service corridor, down one more flight. The hotel staff tried to stop the procession politely, then gave up when they realized they were being ignored by 200 wealthy people who had decided they were going to witness something. The crowd filled the training room, lined the walls, created a circle of observers around the perimeter. Photographers pulled out cameras. Journalists who had been covering the gala suddenly realized the actual story had arrived. The training room was exactly what had been described. Padded floors, mirrors on one wall, beams along the ceiling. Professional grade space. Enough room for what was about to happen without anyone getting hurt. Or rather, without anyone getting hurt who did not want to be. Chuck removed his jacket, unbuttoned his dress shirt, set both aside. He was wearing a black t-shirt underneath. Simple, no demonstration gear, no special preparation, just a man in a black t-shirt. Seagal did the same. Jacket, dress shirt, set aside. Black t-shirt underneath. They faced each other about 10 feet apart. Chuck on one side, Seagal on the other. The light from the mirrors made everything very clear. A security guard who had been drinking at the gala approached hesitantly. "Should I call someone? Should we document liability?" Chuck looked at him gently. "We're two martial artists testing a philosophical disagreement. No one's going to get hurt." The certainty in his voice did not make the guard feel better, but it made him stop trying to prevent it. Chuck took a ready stance. Natural, relaxed, the stance of someone who has stood this way 10,000 times. Seagal took his Aikido stance. Knees bent, centered, hands prepared to feel and redirect force. One of the journalists started a stopwatch. 1 minute. Mark? Seagal moved first. He advanced with the confidence of someone who had thrown trained partners for 15 years. His right hand reached for Chuck's gi. There was no gi, so his hand reached for Chuck's t-shirt. The reach was smooth, controlled, textbook Aikido entry. Chuck was not there. He had moved offline so subtly that the crowd was uncertain whether he had moved or whether Seagal had simply missed. Seagal's hand closed on empty air where Chuck's center line had been 1/10 of a second earlier. Seagal reset, tried again. A different approach. A turning motion designed to redirect Chuck's balance, but Chuck's balance was not where the technique was aimed. It was already somewhere else, existing in a location that the technique had passed through moments before. 20 seconds in. Seagal had delivered 4 different Aikido techniques. None had connected with anything remotely like actual engagement. Seagal's breathing changed, not from exertion, from realization, from understanding that what he was encountering was not resistance to his techniques, it was the absence of target for his techniques to resist against. He attacked with more commitment. A clean takedown attempt, the kind that had worked in demonstrations 50 times. He got his grip. He rotated his body to execute the throw. But Chuck had already transferred his weight and stepped back in a way that made the throw work for him instead of against him. Seagal found himself throwing empty air and losing his own balance in the process. 35 seconds. Seagal tried a striking technique which violated his Aikido philosophy but demonstrated his desperation. A punch toward Chuck's face, faster and more direct than Aikido typically moves. Chuck blocked it with minimal effort. Not hard, just redirecting the force slightly, enough to show he could have done anything else. 40 seconds. Seagal's face was red, not from exertion. From the heat of understanding he was being systematically demonstrated to in front of 200 people who had paid significant money to attend a charity gala. He committed everything he had to one more throw. A proper Aikido technique, textbook, executed with real intention and real force. His body was completely engaged. His timing was good. His execution was clean. Chuck stepped back and let the throw complete itself through empty air. Seagal ended up on his own knees, having thrown nothing, having committed all his momentum to a demonstration that had no target. The journalist counted down the last few seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time 1 minute had passed. Seagal was on one knee, breathing hard, staring at the floor. Not angry. Something past anger, something that required processing. Chuck extended his hand to help him up. Seagal looked at the hand for a moment, then he took it. Chuck pulled him to his feet with the easy strength that comes from 40 years of training. They stood facing each other, both breathing, both present. Seagal's world had shifted. The specific shift that happens when someone's entire framework for understanding something has to be rebuilt because the evidence has forced it. Chuck looked at him with complete, unhurried respect. "You're very good," Chuck said quietly. "Your Aikido is clean, your technique is precise, your understanding of your art is genuine, you've trained seriously and for years. That's all real and that's all valuable. But you made an assumption that happens a lot in the martial arts world. You assumed that different training methods produced different levels of fundamental skill. That if you trained in sport martial arts and someone else trained in film-influenced combat, there was a hierarchy between them. He paused. Seagal was listening completely, his anger replaced by something closer to humility. The truth is, Chuck continued, there's only one hierarchy that matters. Not style, not method, not what you call your art, just this. Have you tested yourself against real resistance? Have you failed? Have you learned? Have you spent decades understanding the difference between looking powerful and being powerful? He gestured around the room. I spent 40 years in that difference. Some of it in tournaments, some of it in films, some of it in teaching. But every single time I had to choose, do I perform for the audience or do I perform for the opponent? And the moment you choose performance over honesty, people will know. Maybe not immediately, maybe not for years, but they will know. Seagal's face had gone through several different expressions. Anger, shame, defensive justification. But now it was settling into something quieter, something that looked like actual learning. Come back to my school, Chuck said. Train with me. Real training, not demonstrations, not film preparation. Real martial arts. Test yourself against resistance that knows what you're trying to do and resists anyway. That's where you'll find out who you actually are beneath what the camera sees. Seagal looked at him. Why would you offer that after I just? Because that's what real martial artists do, Chuck said simply. We don't defeat people and then ignore them. We defeat people and then teach them. That's been my experience anyway. The defeats have all been teachers. The victories have all been just moments. But the defeats have changed careers. The aftermath. Seagal did not come back to Chuck's school. But that was a choice he made with full information about what that choice meant. In the years that followed, he continued making action films. They were successful films. But his approach changed. He stopped claiming Aikido was superior to other martial arts. He stopped implying that demonstration was equivalent to combat testing. He stopped making statements that positioned film-based martial arts against tradition-based martial arts. Chuck Norris never discussed the incident publicly. When asked by journalists, he would say only that it was a private conversation between two martial artists and should remain private, which meant it became more legendary, not less. Which meant everyone who heard the story added their own details, their own interpretations, their own need to understand what had happened in that training room. The truth was simpler and more complicated than any of the legends. The truth was that Seagal had been young enough to believe that film success and genuine martial skill were the same thing. And Chuck, who had learned decades earlier that they were not, had been patient enough to teach him that lesson without humiliation. The truth was that Seagal's Aikido was beautiful and real and limited by the same thing all martial arts are limited: the specific context in which they were developed. And that Chuck's karate was equally specific, but had been tested in enough different contexts that it had become portable. The truth was that when Seagal walked back up those stairs to the charity gala and returned to his table, something had changed in him that would never change back. Not his skills. Those remained what they were. But his understanding of what skill actually meant had been revised. And the people who had watched it knew that they had witnessed something real. Not choreography, not performance, just truth. Two martial artists testing a philosophical disagreement. One had been wrong about something important. One had responded not with cruelty but with instruction. That is what changed everything. Not Seagal's career, though the films that came after were better because his understanding was deeper. Not Chuck's reputation, though his reputation was already established. What changed was the conversation in the martial arts world about what mattered. About the difference between looking powerful and being powerful. About the specific humility required of anyone who claims to understand combat. Years later, Seagal would have a very successful film career. He would make dozens of action films. Some of them would be good, some of them would be forgotten. He would be remembered as a legitimate martial artist and an action film star. Both things would be true. But everyone in the martial arts community would know that one night in a hotel training room in Los Angeles, he had learned that performance and preparation were not the same thing. That demonstration and combat were not the same thing. That film and reality operated by different rules, and that the gap between what he thought he was and what he actually was could be closed. but only if he was willing to be taught by someone who had already closed that gap. Chuck Norris lived the life of a martial artist who became an actor rather than an actor who became a martial artist. And in that simple reversal of order, in that commitment to mastery before fame, he had demonstrated something that could not be demonstrated. It could only be lived. 1 minute, 2 martial artists, 200 witnesses, and a lesson that echoed through the martial arts world for decades. Not because Chuck defeated Seagal, but because he defeated Seagal's assumptions without destroying Seagal. That is real skill. That is real mastery. That is what changed everything.